Hey guys, Dan with Warpaint JKU. In this quick episode, I'm going to teach you how to do a very quick but fairly accurate alignment on the front end of your Jeep JK. And it's real simple, basic hand tools, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, so here I am inside a Warpaint, a 2015 JKU, and if you've ever been driving down the street and noticed that your steering was kind of fighting you, right? You were locally at an off-road park, you just got back from a long road trip, you hit a pothole, anything like that. When you let go of your steering wheel, it should track pretty straight down the road. That doesn't always happen, especially once you have big tires and a modified front suspension. Now, if you've ever noticed on your Jeep that your steering wheel is off center as you're driving straight down the road, there's a reason for that. It's a really simple adjustment. And if your steering wheel gets that far off of being centered as you're driving down the road, it can create all sorts of problems where you actually wind up having skid control, kind of put on traction control and that kind of thing. I'll explain why it does that in just a second, but join me at the front of the Jeep. I'm going to point out what the drag link and what the tie rod are and how you would adjust those to fix those issues. So here we are in front of the front axle of Warpaint. Now my front axle might be a little bit different than most of yours. If you've watched my walk around video or seen some of my stuff over on Instagram at Warpaint JKU, you'll know that my axle is actually swapped. It's a Dana 60 instead of a standard Dana 30 or a Dana 44, which you'll find in a factory JK. My Dana 60 came out of a 2011 Ford Super Duty pickup truck, and I did that for the reliability of running bigger tires and having heavy dutier suspension components and steering components. But I have a crossover steering kit in here, so it basically mimics the same steering that you would have on a Dana 30 or a Dana 44. So you have two bars in front of your axle, okay? Those two bars are responsible for your toe, which is making sure that your front wheels are both parallel to each other and going straight down the road. And you have another one that's responsible for your steering input, okay? Your steering input, that bar is going to be the upper bar, which is also referred to as your drag link, okay? Now, your drag link is controlled over here by what's called a pitman arm. Your pitman arm, if you can see it down here, right? This is the drag link, this is the pitman arm. The pitman arm is up in here, just out of view, is connected to something called a sector shaft. Now, that sector shaft is controlled by your steering box, okay? If we back up from the steering box, your steering wheel. So when your steering wheel is off center, okay, or you give your vehicle some steering input, it's going to spin that sector shaft one way or the other. And when it spins that sector shaft, it's going to either push this pitman arm right here one way or the other. And what that does is it pushes or pulls on your drag link, which is connected over here to your passenger side knuckle. So basically, all the steering that you have is controlled through that passenger side wheel, okay? And because those two wheels are connected with this lower bar here, we'll talk about that in just a second, both wheels do the same thing when you turn the steering wheel. Now, if your steering wheel is a little off center because you hit a pothole, you were off-roading, you were a little hard on your front suspension, or just time, if it's off center when you're driving down the road, this is a very easy thing to adjust. I will show you how to do that in just a second. But something I mentioned a minute ago with your electronic skid control and your traction control. Now, let me explain something. The master engineers, okay, at Dodge, which Jeep, same company, all modern day Dodge vehicles, okay, I don't care if you're driving a Charger or a Jeep Grand Cherokee or a Jeep Wrangler, they all have the same type of computer is controlling those motors and that steering. Okay, even if you have a different motor, the computer is still going to control the steering in those vehicles the exact same way. And this is what it does. It's actually pretty sophisticated. It takes the percentage of throttle input, 0% no throttle input, 100% your floor in the gas pedal. It takes the percentage of throttle input and then matches that to the percentage of steering input, right? So with steering, same thing. 100% all the steering wheel's locked to one side or the other. 0% your steering wheel is centered, okay? So the vehicle essentially, okay, is smart enough to realize that if you're steering something like a Jeep, right? Top heavy, they roll over easier than like a Dodge Charger. What it does is it takes the amount of steering percentage, okay, and the amount of throttle input and your speed, and it combines all that to know whether it's comfortable with you driving like you're driving. So essentially, if you were to take your car and leave the skid control on and try to bring it out in a snowy dead-end street and try to spin it around and do a donut, that's why your skid control kicks in and prevents you from doing that, because it knows that you are turning the steering wheel all the way, a lot of steering input, and then a lot of gas pedal. And it knows with the power that those motors make that it's going to spin it around in a circle. And the whole idea of skid control is to stop you from spinning around in circles, okay? That's how it figures it out. So if we go back to the Jeep not being aligned correctly and your steering input is not centered, it's not at 0, you're giving it a little bit of steering to go straight because it's out of alignment. Sometimes if it's that far out of alignment, it considers that steering input. So now when you hit the gas to drive it down the road, it thinks you're giving it a lot of throttle, and then all of a sudden it thinks you're giving it a lot of steering. And if it's too much throttle for that amount of steering, boom, it locks you down, okay? So you can have that issue, and that's exactly why. So if you're ever off-road or on a trail and all of a sudden you pull out of the off-road park and you're driving down the street and you can't drive fast because it keeps shutting you down, that's why. All you have to do is find a nice safe parking lot somewhere. Hopefully you have enough tools with you and just adjust this drag link, which again is very easy to do. Let's check it out. Okay, so we said before that this drag link is the upper bar, okay? The top bar of the drag link. Now, my drag link might look a little different, not because it's a Dana 60 necessarily, but because it's aftermarket. A lot of aftermarket drag links will have what kind of looks like a ball joint on this end, and then it might have a lock nut with some adjustment in it. And if it doesn't, it'll usually have that on the other end up by the pitman arm, okay? So if it's not here, you do it over there. Same idea, same principle, okay? Basically, you want to loosen this jam nut, and I have to loosen it on the other end as well because I have two. And once you loosen it, you're going to rotate this bar, okay? You're going to rotate it one way, and your steering wheel will move towards one direction. And you'll rotate it the other way and it'll move back the other direction. So essentially you want to pull your vehicle over on the side of the road. You want to make sure that your wheels are pointing straight, and then you want to align your steering wheel based on the way your tires are pointed. So you want to make sure, like I said, you want to make sure that your tires are pointed straight. And once your tires are pointed straight, that's when you loosen this bar, you adjust it so that your steering wheel is also pointed straight, and then you lock this bar down again. And that's all there is to it. That should fix your steering input issue. All right, guys, so tie rod is going to be this lower bar, right? The upper bar is going to be your drag link. The bottom bar is going to be your tie rod. Now, your tie rod has your steering stabilizer, or in this case, your hydraulic ram attached to it. And again, the ends are the same way. Usually they're ball joints. It's like a ball joint. They call them tie rod ends, but it basically looks like a ball joint. It's the same kind of design. Mine, again, are Heim joints, just like they were on the drag link. Mine are Heims because they're aftermarket. Now, if you have an aftermarket, they may also be Heims, but it's the same idea. There's a lock nut on this side. There's a lock nut on the other side. You're going to want to turn it. Now, getting the measurement for your tie rod is different. You're going to need a tape measure. But again, adjustable wrench and a tape measure, it's all you need for this. The bottom line here, guys, is you want your tires towed in. You want them pointing in toward each other 1/8 of an inch compared to the rear. So you want to measure off a point in the front, get that measurement, measure off the same point on the rear of your tire, get that measurement, and you want the one in the front to be 1/8 of an inch shorter than the one in the rear. And that's it. It's actually pretty easy to do it if you take the wheels off and then you clamp a straight edge to your brake rotor, and then you measure that straight edge right in front of the brake rotor, right behind the brake rotor, and again you just turn that bar one way or the other, small little tiny increments until you get that 1/8 of an inch shorter in the front, which means they're towed in the front. That helps it move on down the road nice and easy. That's basically it for an alignment. If you take your Jeep to one of these cheap alignment shops, that's all they're going to do. They're going to check your toe, and they're going to center your steering wheel with your drag link, and they're going to slap it on the ass and send it on its way. Now, Castor Angle is completely different. I will do a whole nother video on Castor Angle because depending upon lift height and drive shafts and axles can change your Castor Angle. To put it simply, you want your whole axle, if you look at your C's on the end, right? If you look at your C's are what have your ball joint on the top, a ball joint on the bottom, and your knuckle attaches to your C. You want, ideally, 6 degrees of Castor. So it's leaning backwards 6 degrees, leaning toward the driver, right? Toward the driver's seat, toward the rear of the Jeep, 6 degrees. The way your Jeep is set up from the factory, if you didn't lift it and you have a factory axle with factory control arms, it's set at 6 degrees. The problem is your drive shaft. That front drive shaft is short. It's a lot shorter than the rear, and it's the same on a JK versus a JKU. It doesn't matter, they're both the same length. When you have that front drive shaft in here, it doesn't like steep angles. And the higher you lift your vehicle, the steeper angle that drive shaft gets. So in order to correct that, you have to actually take some Castor out of the Jeep. You have to lean the axle forward so it's not at 6 degrees anymore. The problem is the more forward you lean your axle, it starts to wander all over the road. Like it never corrects the steering wheel back to center. Your steering wheel might be center, but your Jeep's drifting and wandering like it has a mind of its own. A lot of that is due to your lift and due to not having enough Castor. The problem is if you put enough Castor on a factory axle with a lift, you wind up having drive shaft vibrations and drive shaft issues. And those drive shaft issues can be so extreme. Surprisingly, it doesn't take much. It'll actually wear the bearing out on the front of your transfer case. And now that's a very expensive repair. So aftermarket drive shafts help with that. But again, that's a whole nother video. That's kind of complicated depending upon the degrees and all that kind of stuff. And I'll make another video about that. But again, guys, lots more videos to come, lots of simple stuff. I urge you to get out there, turn a wrench, because working on your own Jeep, not only is it rewarding, not only are you going to save some money, but developing these kinds of skills and being comfortable doing this kind of thing will bail you out of a situation at the off-road park when you can't get home because you bent something or something's off. And it's also going to help you get your hands dirty and get your feet wet doing this kind of stuff to the point where you work up to maybe being able to do an axle swap yourself, right? And that's the whole goal of this channel. I've talked about it before. You know, again, guys, I know this video is kind of long. I promise I'm only going to keep you for another minute. But, you know, a lot of these people that you see on the internet that we watch crawl in their Jeeps have a lot of money in their Jeeps. They have a lot of factory support and a lot of those things. And again, I've said it before. I work with a couple of companies because they're great, but they don't pay me, okay? I have a normal job. I have a normal life. I'm in a normal messy garage. I have a hockey net behind me for my kids with a normal family. You know, this is my life. So there's no way that I could have a Jeep on 1-tons and 40s and beadlocks and all this other stuff if I had to pay a shop to build this Jeep the way that you see it. I didn't. I built it all myself. I re-geared my axles myself. I did everything myself. This Jeep has never been to a shop. So that's what this channel is supposed to help you guys do. It's all fun and good to watch those expensive, crazy Jeeps on YouTube because we enjoy doing it. Heck, I like watching them when I can't be at the off-road park. But we all want Jeeps like that too, and you can have one. My Jeep performs exactly like those Jeeps. My Instagram page will show you. Some of the wheeling content I've posted will show you. It performs really well, but I built it on a normal everyday guy budget myself. And if you continue to follow this channel, guys, and subscribe, hit that like button, I promise you that you will learn a ton on this channel and you will be able to wind up gaining the confidence and the skills that you need to be able to further your build yourself and save a whole bunch of money so you're not paying some shop labor to work on it. All right? So anyway, guys, appreciate you watching. Stay tuned, lots more videos coming. And like I said, give it a subscribe so you don't miss anything. Check out that Instagram page that has posts daily going up, live check-ins, all that kind of stuff. Check that out, and stay tuned for some more wheeling and more how-to stuff. Thanks.